question proposed is that whereas alcohol consumption is the third largest risk factor of disease and disability worldwide and is responsible for an estimated 2.5 million deaths annually, and additionally for males 15 to 59 years of age, and is the leading risk factor for death.
With protocol already established, Mr. Speaker, as Minister for Youth, I stand resolute with the motion and wish to move for the adoption of the following resolution as read. Be it resolved that it is imperative for the government to develop appropriate legislations to prevent the consumption of alcohol by persons under the age of 21 and to mandate with immediate effect that the sale of alcohol be prohibited at school functions open to the public and that there be an increase in taxes on the sale of alcohol beverages in the country. Mr. Speaker, according to collinsdictionary.com, alcohol is defined as a volatile, flammable liquid which is produced by the natural fermentation of sugars and is the intoxicating constituent of wine, beer, spirits, and other drinks. It is also used in products such as perfumes and cleaning fluids. Mr. Speaker, as stated by the World Health Organization, Grenada's total adult per capita consumption of alcohol, which is defined as the per capita amount of alcohol consumed in liters of pure alcohol among individuals 15 years of age or older, is 10.35 liters annually, compared to an average of 6.15 liters worldwide and 8.67 in the Americas. Not surprisingly, statistics also showed that in a survey conducted that involved adolescents in Grenada, it was seen that over a 30-day period, the percentage of students who tried alcohol for the first time was 13.5%. Also within this survey, the percentage of students who had a drink containing alcohol in the last 30 days was 35%, and the percentage of students reported to having alcohol in their lifetime was 70%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this can be attributed to the Liquor Dealers License Act, Cap 174, which states that a person under the age of 16 can purchase alcohol once it is sold or delivered or supplied in corked or sealed vessels for consumption of the premises only. Mr. Speaker, we need to make an amendment to this act and raise the age to 21 for various reasons, which my colleagues and I will now present. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that alcohol causes a multitude of health effects on the body, such as the following. According to the World Health Organization, alcohol consumption could be traced back to causing the development of 4.2 cases of cancer per year, 2.3 million cases of liver and pancreatic disease development, 13 million cases of heart complication development, and was the third highest cause of premature death in 2016, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, permit me to explain why this is so. Alcohol consumption and its effects starts at the point of entry. Alcohol is an irritant. It burns when it comes into contact of the sensitive body surfaces in the body, as you may know if you have used it as a disinfectant for a cut. Mr. Speaker, when you take a sip of alcohol, the impact is no different, especially when you consume high-proof liquor. According to drugabuse.com, the immediate burning sensation you notice in your mouth and down the delicate lining of your esophagus is a burn that could eventually kill your body's living tissues, and with prolonged consumption can lead to the development of various cancers, as well as the health complications mentioned before and more. My colleague and Honorable Minister for Health would elaborate further. Mr. Speaker, with that in mind, and Grenada's alcohol consumption statistics, does this not pose for an unfavorable outcome for the persons of Grenada? Aren't our people, especially our youth, in trouble if this behavior is allowed to continue? I think so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with that said, my colleagues and I are not unaware of information that hints towards slight health benefits of alcohol in moderate amounts. But Mr. Speaker, what is moderate? How do we measure it? According to research from the University of San Francisco, alcohol is a known addicting substance as it causes the brain to release endorphins, which result in a temporary feel-good feeling. temporary, Mr. Speaker. What happens when this feeling wears off? Most persons reach for alcohol again to get this feeling. Mr. Speaker, are we as the government supposed to trust that in the hands of our young people a highly addictive substance that elicits a temporary pleasurable response, at the face of this, would they be able to have it in moderate amounts if legislations are not put in place? I think not, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conjunction with my previous points, alcohol also impairs cognitive function and can lead to long-term brain damage, especially in our young persons. Now let me explain. The human brains consist of many neurons. For those of us not familiar with the term, a neuron is a cell that transmits nerve impulses in the brain and allows us to move and function. Now, according to the Delphi Behavioral Health Group, alcohol is a toxin which damages and kills these cells, resulting in a slurred speech, loss of mobility, and impaired decision-making. Now, if this isn't bad enough, this is especially dangerous in young persons for the following reason. Mr. Speaker, a study done by Rochester University showed that, and I quote, "The rational part of a human brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25 or so," end quote. So, Mr. Speaker, our young persons are negatively altering the structure of their brain while in its key developmental stage when they consume alcohol under the age of 25. Mr. Speaker, while I do understand that there are other major decisions that can be made at younger ages, such as the age of consent at 16 and the age of legal marriage at 18, neither of these decisions permanently alter brain composition. Mr. Speaker, most of our young persons under the age of 21 are still in school and will need their brain at peak functioning capacity. Mr. Speaker, we all know that education is key to the developing country. Can we really let alcohol stand in the way of this? I think not. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we are in the era of technology where almost everything is put online. That is not limited to questionable decisions that may have been made, recorded, and uploaded under the influence of alcohol. Mr. Speaker, what many of our young persons today don't know is that when you apply for colleges and job applications, these places look at these things, Mr. Speaker, and these things can hinder your acceptance to such institutions. Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Youth, it pains me to think that our young persons could rob themselves of a promising future over something as unnecessary as alcohol. With that said, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues and I are not unreasonable. We are aware that revenue is gained from the sale of alcohol. So we are not asking that we ban the consumption of alcohol altogether. What we are asking is for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to put measures in place, such as taxes on the consumption of alcohol and the prohibition of sale of alcohol at school functions in an attempt to protect our young people. Mr. Speaker, I leave you with this thought today. It was James Baldwin who so rightly said, "A country is only as strong as its people." With this in mind, Mr. Speaker, worthy opponents, I implore that we put the well-being of our young people first, as they are the future leaders of our country. I thank you.
Any other contributions on the matter? Be seconded. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise before this honorable House to second the motion, since I am in full support of the bill presented by my coadjutor Minister for Youth and Leader of Government Business. Fellow parliamentarians, all pleasant good morning. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposed today is comprehensive and far-reaching and aims to decrease the availability of alcohol to persons under the age of 21, to deter vendors from selling alcohol to persons under this age, and to increase the minimum legal drinking age and minimum legal purchasing age of alcohol to 21. We recognize that legislation alone cannot eliminate a society's ills. However, we believe that a healthy marriage of legislation, policies, and programs is necessary in order to effectively tackle this issue. Alcohol should not be sold at school functions because it exposes the students unnecessarily to alcohol, and because school administrators should not be put in a situation whereby they are effectively forced to to hold fundraising events which have alcoholic beverages due to either limited resources or small budgets. Considering and recognizing this reality, a team led by the Honorable Minister of Education in collaboration with the Ministers for Youth and Legal Affairs are in the process of revising the National Schools Policy on Drugs and Alcohol. We are committed to increasing funding in education so as to eliminate the need for schools to have fundraising events, and this additional funding, Mr. Speaker, will be derived from the additional taxes which our government will impose on alcohol. In a study conducted by Duke University's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, adolescent rodents were repeatedly exposed to alcohol. The exposure was stopped when they reached adulthood, and the resulting brain activity was monitored at the cellular level. Mr. Speaker, the exposure of the rat's not fully developed brain to alcohol made the animals stupid. The study deduced that repeated alcohol exposure resulted in long-lasting changes to the region of the brain that controls learning and memory, disrupting the maturation process, which can affect cognitive functions later on, according to Dr. Marie Louis. Further compounded, Mr. Speaker, de Bellis et al. Postulated that during adolescence, alcohol can lead to structural changes in the hippocampus, and that high levels can permanently impair brain development. Spear 2002. The rationale is simple. Alcohol and Alcoholism, Volume 44, 2009, found that children and adolescents have greater vulnerability to alcohol than adults. In addition to usually being physically smaller, they lack experience of drinking and its effects. Bonomo et al. 2001 found that drinking by adolescents and young adults is associated with automobile crash injury and death, decreased academic performance, memory loss, fighting, property damage, transmission of STDs, and unwanted pregnancies. Mr. Speaker, the very malices that we as a Grenadian society currently face. We as government are committed to this cause and thus have devised a number of policies and programs which have been informed by the precedent from various countries that have enacted similar legislation. We will roll out a program called DACAP, the Dangers of Alcohol Consumption Awareness Program, in all our schools and communities. It will sensitize adolescents as to the dangers of alcohol consumption. Sessions in this program will be interactive and afford the students the opportunity to develop advertisement campaigns, skits, and even jingles with the same aim. A team led by the Minister for Legal Affairs is currently holding discussions with a number of stakeholders as we are in the process of drafting supplementary legislation to this bill. We will soon bring a bill which will mandate that ID cards be presented by an individual in order to purchase alcoholic beverages, and that fines and terms of imprisonment be increased. A tax of 15% will be placed on alcoholic beverages with an alcohol percentage of 20% and above, and a fine of $1,500 or a term of imprisonment of 6 months or more for persons who knowingly or unknowingly sell alcohol due to negligence or intentionally, or distribute alcohol to a minor. Mr. Speaker, will a decrease, Mr. Speaker, may I be permitted 2 minutes to finish my presentation?
You may.
Thank you. Increasing the age will decrease alcohol consumption by persons under the age of 21. To prove this, Professor of Health and Law at the University of Virginia, Richard Boney, said that the evidence is overwhelming that raising the age of alcohol reduces alcohol consumption. A 2014 review of the same research conducted in the US, published in the Journal of Drugs and Alcohol, found that the number of fatally injured drivers with a positive blood alcohol concentration decreased by 57%, Mr. Speaker, among persons under 21, compared with a 39% decrease for those 21 to 24, when the minimum legal drinking age was increased to 21%. A minimum legal drinking age of 21 is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Community Preventative Task Force, National Highway Safety Traffic Administration, National Prevention Council, the National Academy of Sciences. Mr. Speaker, the fundamental reason why the minimum legal drinking age should be increased is that it saves lives. In an extensive study done by Dr. Timothy Nemi, published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs, the exposure to alcohol advertisement was related to the greater amount of alcohol children consume. In response to this, our government will be looking to increase regulations on alcohol advertising in our country. We cannot leave the status quo as is. We have a moral responsibility as government to ourselves, to our children, to our nation's children, in order to pass this bill. I therefore make a clarion call to all parliamentarians to do the responsible thing. Put aside vested interests and partisan politics. History will judge us by the decision we make here today. I thank you.
Is there any more contributions on the motion? Honorable Member for Clcou West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to inform the House on reasons why I'm opposed to the resolution that has brought us here today. Mr. Speaker, before we consider changing the law on age of access, we should focus on more effective enforcement of the law and strategies to ensure compliance with the law. Mr. Speaker, raising the age limit does not stop minors from drinking. Rather, it encourages them to binge drink, which would in turn lead to an adverse effect later in their adulthood. Why don't we work together with our key stakeholders in solidifying the alcohol policy into a comprehensive one? Mr. Speaker, according to the National School Policy on Drug, it states many challenges, one of the challenges being, and I quote, alcohol is socially and culturally accepted. End of quote. Where is this happening, you may ask? I'll enlighten you. In our very own churches. In communion, yes, Holy Communion. At the tender age of 7 to 13, children will have had their first sip of the forbidden drink, alcohol, in the form of wine. Mr. Speaker, where are enforcers of the law then? Do they arrest or charge these men? Mr. Speaker, the Grenada National Alcohol Policy, as of this date, have no existing law or policy in Grenada that governs the alcohol advertisements, leaving our young children vulnerable to view the illicit drink at any hour they choose to look at the television, thus making it seem as the norm. We should prohibit these types of advertisement during prime time and during programming aimed at minors under the age of 18. Mr. Speaker, as we look around our lovely island, I must definitely say there are very little posters at a primary level educating our minors about the abuse or effects of alcohol, especially at our schools. Aren't the abuse of alcohol along the same line as sexual abuse or drug abuse? Where are our programs generated to educate our children at an early age until they leave our institutions? Mr. Speaker, in regards to the sale of alcohol at school function, let me refresh you what a school function is. It means a function organized by a school or any organization or personnel who conduct such functions on behalf of the school. Mr. Speaker, how do you expect the school to generate much needed funds to carry on in their daily activities?
Honorable Member, your time has elapsed, but I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes to complete your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Funds which are raised at graduation balls and at sporting functions. School is a better environment in which to monitor the sale of alcohol, where there are teachers, principals, and parents to ensure that minors not participate in the said drink. Bear in mind, we aren't saying to sell drinks to minors, but to adults with proper identification. Mr. Speaker, if the government is to eradicate the sale of alcohol at these functions, are they willing to give all, yes, all the schools the monetary funds that they need? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for your contribution. Is there any other contribution on the motion? Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of this bill brought forward here today in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, it grieves my heart as Minister for Health to see so many young men and women not only consuming alcohol, but abusing it. Today, Mr. Speaker, alcohol is widely available and aggressively promoted throughout society. And alcohol continues to be regarded by many people as a normal part of growing up. Yet, Mr. Speaker, underage drinking is dangerous. According to the National Institute of Drug and Alcohol, not only is alcohol dangerous for the drinker, but also for society, as evidenced by the number of alcohol-involved incidents. Alcohol attribute deaths in Grenada, according to the 2018 report, which was conducted by the World Health Organization, liver cirrhosis, 6 persons, road traffic injuries, 3 persons, and cancers, 9 persons. That is at least 18 persons in 1 year so far, Mr. Speaker, dying from alcohol consumption, be it directly or indirectly. Mr. Speaker, in our little tri-island state, can we afford such amounts of unnecessary deaths yearly? This is a problem that needs an immediate solution. Mr. Speaker, the ultimate aim of our administration by presenting this bill is not just to limit alcohol consumption among our young people, but also to build a healthier nation and to reduce the amount of alcohol consumption throughout the length and breadth of our nation, such that we would no longer be the second largest alcohol consuming nation per capita in the region. Mr. Speaker, the consumption of alcohol causes many health risks. According to the U.S. Department of Alcohol and Drug Use, alcohol interferes with the brain's communication pathways and also disrupts the mood and behavior and makes it difficult to think. Drinking alcohol over a long time or too much on a single occasion can damage the heart, causing stretching of the heart's muscles, irregular heartbeat, increase the risk of stroke and high blood pressure. Heavy drinking takes a toll on the liver, which can lead to fatty liver, alcoholic hepatitis, fibrosis, and cirrhosis. Mr. Speaker, in studies conducted by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, there is a strong consensus of an association between alcohol consumption and several types of cancers, which include liver cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, and head and neck cancer. Mr. Speaker, while my colleagues and I do recognize that there are a few minimal benefits of moderate, and I repeat, moderate alcohol consumption, such as preventing common cold and preventing gallstones, as found by Harvard School of Public Health, they also found that these benefits are minimally established. It is therefore clear, Mr. Speaker, that the health risks and disadvantages of alcohol consumption far outweigh the benefits. Mr. Speaker, these are the effects of alcohol as found in grown adults. Can you imagine, therefore, what it will do, what it has done, and what it will continue to do to the youths of our country, whose minds and organs have not yet fully developed? I thank you.
Thank you, Honor. Is there any more contributions on the motion at this time? Honorable Member for Petite Martinique.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand firmly opposing the resolution brought before this honorable House. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Member for Civil Aviation.
Mr. Speaker, standing on a point of order, the honourable member is reading.
To you, honourable member, I would like to remind you of the rule that you're not supposed to address the member directly, but address the member through the speaker. Honourable member, please be advised that the rule states that speeches shall be delivered, not read. You may, however, refer to your notes. You may continue your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand firmly opposing the resolution brought before this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, the evidence supports the calls to reconsider young people's access to alcohol by increasing the minimum legal purchase age. But this is a contentious proposition. Mr. Speaker, 18 is recognized as the age by which young persons enter adulthood and gains a number of responsibilities and freedoms, which includes the right to vote and buy a drink. Mr. Speaker, my colleague touched on the policy to permit, on the alcohol policy, But permit me to add, Grenada National Alcohol Policy states in the provisions relating to purchasing and consumption, relating to purchasing and consumption, section 39 states, and I quote, the legal age of purchasing and consumption should be increased to 18 years of age, end quote. This policy has been recently amended in 2012. Mr. Speaker, why all these sudden changes? Have we really seen a drastic misconstrued use of alcohol among young persons between the age 18 to 21? Mr. Speaker, increasing the legal drinking age will not result in a decrease in alcohol-related harm among young people in a country where individuals are legally obliged to vote at age 18. It is unlikely to gain political support. Mr. Speaker, the evidence about the benefits of increasing the minimum legal purchase age is strong. It does reduce harm, but it does not reduce access. Mr. Speaker, before we consider changing the laws on age of access, we should focus on resourcing more effective enforcement of and other strategies to ensure compliance with the existing laws. These include not serving to intoxicated patrons, continuing the focus on random pullovers, and that the government should supply all officers with breathalyzers, which reduces in the rate of young drunk drivers and the associated traumas. Mr. Speaker, the professor and director of the National Drug Institute at Curtin University stated in his article that his secondary supply legislation can be enacted in a country which speaks to only that a legal guardian has the right to decide whether their child drinks in a private setting. Mr. Speaker, it is time to encourage an informed community debate.
Honorable member, your time has elapsed, but I'm going to afford you a minute and a half to wrap up your debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is time to encourage an informed community debate about effective approaches to acknowledge the evidence and to address the well-founded concern about alcohol-related harms. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Any more contribution on the motion? Honorable Member, Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Service.
Mr. Speaker, as I am about to go into details, I would like to begin with a quote. The bed you set today is so you shall lie. You cannot get an apple from a lime tree. This is saying that if we encourage our young people to engage in drinking alcohol, our future will then lie in the hands of alcoholics.
Honorable Member for Klcou North.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order that the minister is...
Please, Honorable Member, please state your point of order.
The minister is reading from her notes.
Honorable Member, thank you. Honorable Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Service, please report to 12 states. Speeches shall not be read. Members may, however, report to their notes. Please be mindful of this rule. You may continue your speech.
Mr. Speaker, appropriate legislation should be put in place to prevent the consumption of alcohol by persons under the age of 21. Being that alcohol is a choice among youths, and many young people today are facing the consequences of drinking too much at an early age. According to alcoholism, the average age of first use of alcohol is 14 years, Mr. Speaker. 14 years. Mr. Speaker, the research also shows that children and adolescents who begin to consume alcohol at an early age may harm them and others in return. Some of these behaviors may include drugs such as cocaine and marijuana, and having sex with multiple partners, unprotected. According to Oscar Wilde, and I quote, "You see, from the first class, you see things as you wish. After, you see things as you wish they're not. Finally, you see things as they really are, and that is the most horrible thing in the world." Mr. Speaker, the consumption of alcohol by persons under the age of 21 has severe negative effects. These severe negative effects are brain disease, liver disease, and endocrine disease. Mr. Speaker, as for brain effects, according to National Institute of Alcohol and Alcoholism, alcohol has damaging effects on the brain. Examples are slowed memory, slowed reaction time, and difficulty walking. Add this to the fact that adolescents' brains are still developing. Mr. Speaker, because social media is such an integral part of people's lives, it can also influence the way they drink. Many teenagers spend half of their lives listening to music that are very influential. Most of the artists today, Mr. Speaker, are not singing anything that will educate the youth. For instance, one of the songs goes like this: "We're gonna party tonight, drink some champagne, smoke some weed, don't judge we." Mr. Speaker, this says it all. Mr. Speaker, according to Scientific American, the purchase of alcohol increases severity of violence,
and that 2/3 of intimate partner violence incidents occur because of alcohol. Mr. Speaker, do we want persons of our society to be victims of alcohol abuse, specifically those under the age of 21? No, it's bad for our country. Hence, there should be an increase in tax on the sale of alcoholic beverages in the country.
Mr. Speaker, honorable member, I stand on a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
Honorable member is still reading.
Thank you. Honorable member, Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Service, please be mindful of Rule 12, which states speeches shall not be read. Please continue your presentation without reading. However, you may refer to your notes.
Mr. Speaker, being that not only one, but two and more states in the United States and plus other countries in the world has taken this step and are gaining positive results, I do believe, Mr. Speaker, that our country can gain the same results if we take this step sooner rather than later. Thank you.
At this time, is there any other contributions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Clcou Central.
Mr. Speaker, I stand in full disagreement with this bill put forward in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, it is so unfortunate and disheartening to have members of parliament in this honorable house not discussing the relevant topics such as job creation and healthcare. Instead of spending more time telling an adult they cannot consume alcohol because 18 is legally an adult. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine 16 years is the age of consent? By 18 years, you are able to obtain a driver license. You can marry, have children, enter a legal binding contract, and can be sentenced to death for a crime. But we are here today to raise the age for drinking alcohol or to purchase it to 21. The illogic of this situation is patent. Mr. Speaker, at what age do you consider a person to be an adult? 18 or 21? Are we saying it is easier for someone to purchase a firearm and not be allowed to obtain an alcoholic drink? Mr. Speaker, alcohol is one of the leading attributors to the breakdown of the brain and body when consumed in high quantities over a long period of time. We all know this to be true. However,
Mr. Speaker, stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The honorable member would have stated that it's easier to buy a firearm in the state of Grenada than a beer, whereas there is no legal gun stores in Grenada, nor do we have weapons making factories here. So the honorable member is spreading lies.
Honorable Member for Clcou Central. The Honorable Minister for Tourism and Civil Aviation is asking that you provide some light on the question of the availability and the ease of obtaining a firearm in this state. If you cannot provide such information, I would ask the Honorable Member to retract that statement.
Mr. Speaker, I do not wish to clarify.
Honorable Member, in that case, please retract that statement.
Mr. Speaker, I will give the Minister the information of hand.
Honorable Minister for Tourism and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Member will provide you with such information after the debate. Please ensure that she provides that information to you and to the rest of Honorable Members for perusal.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Clcou Central, you may continue your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the World Health Organization released a new initiative and technical package on 28 September 2018, outlining 5 impact strategies that can help all countries reduce the harmful use of alcohol and relate health, social, and economical consequences. Mr. Speaker, we as a country need to open our eyes to the bigger picture and grab onto opportunities like this. Instead of enacting this bill but forward here today, we are moving into a new era. And if we are moving into a new era, and if we think increasing the age of alcohol will alleviate this problem, Mr. Speaker, we have a next thing coming. We have to come up with new avenues to reach youth population, such as youth forums and not...
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The honorable member stated that we should be focusing on job creation and healthcare, but I would like to ask her, isn't this bill relevant in the context of healthcare due to the negative repercussions that alcohol has on the human resource of our country, specifically the youth? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for Clcou. Please be mindful of the question proposed.
Mr.
The bill put forward in the name of the Minister of Youth deals specifically with health. So please be mindful. You may continue your speech.
Mr. Speaker, my other minister right here have the facts, so she will give you offhand.
But Honorable Member, you may continue your speech, but please read over the bill.
Mr. Speaker, we have to come up with new avenues to reach the youth population, such as youth forums and not higher taxes and blatant ridiculous laws. Mr. Speaker, outlawing moderate use of alcohol in appropriate social context, we will drive more drinking underground. This will allow underage drivers, as they are no longer permitted an occasional beer. Therefore, they are more likely to drink alcohol in dangerous quantities before attending a party, and this causes more harm than good. Mr. Speaker, to conclude, it is my hope to encourage our young people to reach a rational decision based on reasoned argument. In this case of minimum drinking age, the country is not ready to undertake such an endeavor financially and physically irresponsible. The youth can hardly look to their leaders to find the kind of moral behavior we are asking of them. It is plain sight that alcohol has its place among us culturally. So please, let's continue to educate our young minds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for your contribution. Is there any other contribution on the motion? Honorable Member.
Charity begins at home and it ends abroad. Let us grow our children in the right way so that they can become responsible adults. My fellow brothers and sisters, as I stand before you with this bill brought forward here today in this honorable house, it is pertinent to our students and young persons that the enactment of such a law take immediate effect, as it is imperative to our tri-island states, Grenada, Clcou, and Petite Martinique. As Minister for Education, our ministry has been an upscale, and there are clear and convincing evidence that we are doing things right for our country in protecting our youth from alcohol abuse, alcohol addiction, alcohol intimidation, and the flat-out menacing contribution alcohol plays on their lives. According to the Additional Capital Poison Center, too much alcohol is bad for everyone, but for young persons, it causes problems that most people are ignorant of. Too much children are drinking harmful amounts of alcohol, putting them at risk for fighting, family and work problems, and even dropping out of school. According to Dave Alexandria from the Grenada Drug Control Secretariat in 2017, 96% of secondary school children in Clcou have been experimented with drinking alcohols. In addition, 69% of secondary school children in Clcou consume alcohol mainly in sporting events. That isn't surprising when you consider it up until today. Mr. Speaker, it is urgent that prevention strategies relating to alcohol and our youth to be mandated and to be enforced. We call for a new strategy by increasing tax on sale of alcoholic beverages in the country. According to the law of economics...
Honorable Member for Clcou North.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
Honorable Minister stated that secondary school children are even dropping out. Aren't the age of drinking is 18 years?
Honorable Minister for Education, Human Resource and Religious Affairs, please share some light on the question.
Mr. Speaker, there are still students in school that are at the age of 18. According to the law of economics from Britannica.edu, one of the fundamental laws of economics is that quantity demanded of a product is inversely related to its price, law of demand. However, increasing the price of alcoholic tax, it would be expected that the consumption of alcohol would be lowered. Mr. Speaker, the first step in this pathway submit that tax increases will be passed onto the consumer in the form of higher alcohol prices. Be it resolved that the sale of alcohol be prohibited at school functions. Alcohol should absolutely not be sold at school functions because school should be a safe place for our children. Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity. The Minister of Education stated that no alcohol should be sold at school function. What are we going to give the adults? Box juice and malt?
Honorable Member, to the best of my knowledge, I do think that alcohol is prohibited based on the question proposed, right?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Based on the question proposed, it says alcohol can be sold in a sealed vessel and it can be sold once the intended consumer is not a minor.
Mr. Speaker, but she stated that alcohol should not be sold at school functions. Sold.
Right. Based on the letter of the law, it says that alcohol can be sold only to adults, not minors, once in a sealed vessel. So technically, alcohol should not be sold to minors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have made proposed amendments to the liquor dealer's license law, which speak to the restrictions and denial of temporary license on school grounds and within 100 yards of a school or youth functions. Mr. Speaker, the permanent secretary will be allowed to refuse a license until the applicant has satisfied such a quota. The Ministry of Education will forbid the consumption, sale and distribution of alcohol and alcoholic beverages at school functions. Mr. Speaker, our youth have a drinking problem. We have to act now. Sometimes later becomes never. I rest my case.
By way of information, let me read the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth whereas. It states, whereas under the Liquor Deals License Act Cap 174, a person under the age of 16 years can purchase alcohol once it is sold or delivered or supplied in a corked or sealed vessel for consumption off the premises only, and at the same time does not contain adequate provisions to restrain consumption of alcohol by persons under the age of 16 years old. Is there any more contribution on the motion? Honorable Member for Clcou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I find this quite unethical of our government to take away the income from our school system to please their needs. Yes, I said it, their needs. Changing the age limit to 21 won't make a difference. It will only make it worse. Mr. Speaker, at the age of 18, a young person is an adult. They can marry, they can consent to sexual activities. Why is the government pressuring our young people when it's the very said young people they want to dip their fingers to have them in their high seats that they are in today? Mr. Speaker, why aren't they taking the consideration of our young people? Don't they care about how they would feel about the very said bill being enacted? Mr. Speaker, allow me to quote. According to the alcohol.org, and I quote, peer pressure is a massive factor.
Honorable Member for Clcou East.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
I would like the honorable member to produce facts that state that it would make it worse if you raise the age of alcohol consumption to 21. Does she have facts to back this up?
Thank you. Honorable Member for Clcou East. The Honorable Member for Youth is asking that you provide her with qualitative and quantitative evidence that the consumption of alcohol would be worse if we change the age.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Right, it seems like the Honorable Member has a study. You may continue your presentation.
Thank you. As I was quoting from the alcohol.org, and I quote, peer pressure is a massive factor in whether or not a person will engage in risky behaviors, which includes underage drinking, end quote. Therefore, when we put limitations on our young people, peer pressure comes into play. Mr. Speaker, we are not an international country. Can we afford such a financial change? The government has not put provision on any proper identification shown in small shops or even at large retail shops. Come on, Mr. Speaker. We are not ready for such drastic change in our society, much less in our culture. The age limit has skyrocketed to 21 for the use of alcohol. Why not voting? Why not driver's license? So many whys, Mr. Speaker, but no answers. There is so many more in-depth attention that is confusing our people. We need to consider job security, academic improvement, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, in the 2019 budget reading, Minister of Education and Human Resource Development has given 112.1 million, that's 10.1% of total expenditures. However, schools receive a stipend of $300 to $600 a month. Mr. Speaker, that is not enough to sustain a school. That is why they need to go out and do extracurricular activities in order to sustain the institution. Yes, they may debate and say that monies have been given by various institutions. However, the lack or little of funds cannot sustain. Mr. Speaker, let's say we had...
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
I would like the honorable member of the opposition to present evidence of the finances that she just said that are given to the schools.
Honorable Member for Clcou East, can you provide the Honorable Member this time with a statement of the expensive or the money is given to schools on the basis, the $300?
Yes, I may, and all this information was received from go.gov.gov. So if the Honorable Minister was to go through, he would be
Honorable Member for Tourism and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Member stated that the information she's quoting came from the government, your government's website. So you may have to have a chat with the Minister for Education.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure that information is very wrong. And I have no proof of this information. Joe what? Gov what?
She quoted that the information comes...
I need to see the information, not a statement of where you get the website from.
Honorable Member, the Minister for Education is on your team.
Honorable Member, Mr. Speaker, are you promoting the opposition to tell tales in the Honorable House, sir?
Honorable Member,
Mr.
School
Speaker.
affairs and all affairs dealing with education falls under the portfolio of the Minister for Education. If any member in this Honorable House has that information, that would come from the Minister of or for Education. So, Honorable Minister for Education, can you provide the Honorable House with any information that would Honorable Member?
Mr. Speaker, I find it rather hard to believe that a school with hundreds of children could survive on $300 a month.
Honorable Member, you are twisting the question and you are trying to manipulate the Honorable House. You change your question from the amount of money schools receive to the question on whereas the amount is necessary or sufficient. Which one of the questions do you want the answer for?
Mr. Speaker, I would like the honorable member to present legitimate evidence that the schools receive $300 to $400 a month
Honorable
from
Member.
the Ministry of Education. That is what I'm asking for, nothing else.
Honorable Member, being in the situation where the Minister of Youth and the Minister for Education is on your team and you did not prepare adequately for the session and you did not preempt questions which may come from the opposition, I would have to strike down your question and ask you to have your seat. Honorable Member, you may continue with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we were to go to a school function, can malt, chubby, apple J, can that be suffice for grown folks? I think not, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member?
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The Minister for Member for Clcou East is talking about adults. We are talking about school children.
Honorable Member, I think she's completing her debate and she's referring to adults. She's making a reference. All right? Honorable Member, please be mindful that your debate should be relevant to the question put forward to the Honorable House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, presently we have 2 distillers in Grenada. What example are we showing our young people when we in fact are the producers of rum? Aren't we in fact showing them that it is socially acceptable? We need a different way forward. We need a more retroactive approach, and most of all, one that makes sense, Mr. Speaker. I thank you and rest my case.
Honorable Member, thank you for your very thought-provoking presentation. Honorable Member?
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The Honorable Member for Clcou East stated that the revenue that is gained from the sale of alcohol would be decreased if the sale of alcohol is prohibited in school functions, or the revenue rather for the schools if alcohol sale is prohibited in school functions, I would like her to tell me, even though the local sale of alcohol is decreasing school functions, can this revenue not be regained due to the taxes which the government would acquire from that is put on alcohol?
Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I do not wish to clarify at this time.
Honorable Member, you would provide the Honorable Member with clarification as soon as the session here is completed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any other contributions on the motion? Honorable Member for Honorable Minister for Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable judges, honorable ministers, fellow colleagues, and members of the opposition, with protocol already established, a pleasant good morning. We are living in a world today where alcohol consumption is on the rise, and drinking too much alcohol, Mr. Speaker, on a single occasion can have a serious toll on one's health. There are three major risk factors that associate with the consumption of alcohol. That includes 1, drug abuse, suicide, and alcohol consumption being the third major risk factor. And I repeat, the third major risk factor. We the government have implemented some legislation to mandate the consumption of alcohol, which are as follows. 1, a fine of $2,500 or 9 months in prison for anyone caught in the act of selling alcohol to individuals under the age of 21. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, alcohol consumption is a growing concern in Grenada. Statistics show that 85%, and I repeat, 85% of individuals consume alcohol on a daily basis. Males ages 14 to 60 years, 75% suffer from health problems, Mr. Speaker, and I repeat, health problems. Alcohol interferes with the brain communication pathway that affects the way the brain looks and works. Secondly, the age to consume alcohol should be raised to 21. Why should I say that? Mr. Speaker, for example, in America, the legal age of consent or to drive or to obtain a driver's license is 18. Therefore, we should implement the legal age to drink alcohol to 21 years. Mr. Speaker, for example, you're going to a party today, you cannot differentiate between a minor and an adult. Reason being, their physical appearance. You might mistake a minor for an adult because of the way on how they look. Mr. Speaker, alcohol is a no-no to minors and it is not healthy. I repeat, it is not healthy. Lessen the amount, increase tariff taxes on the amount of alcoholic beverage entering the country. By doing this, the government can lessen the amount of alcohol entering the country. Statistics show that 95%, and I repeat, 95% of individuals are unaware of the health hazards and effects of alcohol on the human body in terms of mood, behavior, and coordination. Individuals who consume alcohol are seen to become highly aggressive, dysfunctional, and show a lack of interest in educational areas. Statistics also states, and I quote, 85% of males show a decline in their curriculum activities, resulting in 250 dropouts per year, Mr. Speaker. Is that what you want for our nation? Is that what you want for our children of tomorrow? The National Cancer Institute of America states the more alcohol a person intake can higher the risk of alcohol consumption on one's health. In 2009, an estimate of 3.5 cancer deaths in the world, which is 19,500, were a result of alcohol consumption. Lastly, but not least, lessen the amount of permits given to individuals to sell alcohol. Statistics also states that 100%, and I repeat, 100% of individuals that consume alcohol were a result of peer pressure, bad homes, and bad parenting, which results into a lack of miscommunication, misguides, and so basically individuals use alcohol as a form or a means to cope with life's problems. For instance, in Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica allowed 2 joints, or also referred as cannabis or reefer, 2 joints per day for individuals. If anyone exceeds that amount, they can be fined or charged. Whereas we are planning to implement laws that will state that if an individual, the limited amount per intake for an individual.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
Honorable member, time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, could you permit me more time, please?
Yeah, honorable member. The Speaker will modulate the debate. However, you are correct. Her time has elapsed, but seeing that she is completing her speech, I allowed her to continue. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, we should implement or we should monitor the
Honorable member for Clcou East.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The Honorable Minister would have mentioned about a lot of the outside world, so I want to know, and she also mentioned individuals within 15 to 21. I just wanted to summarize for the Grenada aspect and not for the broader.
Mr. Speaker, if you will permit me, I have evidence and facts stating my things.
Honorable member for Clcou East, it seems like the member was ready and is ready and capable of providing such evidence. Honorable member. Honorable member, it seems as the honorable members are playing tricks in the honorable house. Honorable member, please provide the other honorable member and the house with the relevant information and not a blank sheet.
Mr.
So please provide. Is it possible for you to provide the honorable member with the necessary information at the end of this session?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
I thank you. You may continue your presentation.
As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, we should allow a 8 or a quarter strong rum per individual or 2 beers per person. If they exceed that amount per day, they too can be fined or charged. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to leave you with this phrase: rum has no owner. Why should I say this, Mr. Speaker? It clearly states that while individuals are looking to alcohol as a solution to life problem, it only creates and causes a problem. Alcohol claims bodies and creates problems. In terms of alcohol, don't give life, it takes life. I thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. Any more contributions? Honorable member for Clcou North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ministers, my fellow opposition members, clerks, good morning. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to the House, I stand firmly against the resolution that has brought us here today. Mr. Speaker, at the age of 18 years, we are considered legally independent, and with that comes with the expectations that we are also able to make decisions of a highly complex nature that impacts both ourselves and the environment. Because we are considered suitably independent and developed to do so. My question is, what is the age of someone eligible enough to vote? My worthy opponents, I believe that is 18 years. And in order to vote, you should be able to understand the various economic arguments and appreciate the various regional impacts of our asylum seekers and have a clear understanding of what each party really stands for beyond few superficial headline issues. On a more personal level, the age of consent to have sex is even 16 years. In essence, you are considered mature enough to make such a drastic decision, which in turn also has a dangerous effect on which alcohol threatens you with. The reason the state allows us to do these things is due to the assumptions that we are making on informed decisions, meaning that we clearly understand the potential consequences of our actions. The choice to drink is perhaps the most informed decision a teenager will ever make, on par with the decision to have safe sex. Mr. Speaker, according to www.drinkingage.procom.org, if you permit me to quote, drinking alcohol is an enjoyable activity for young people, end quote. To the Minister of Social Security, we always speak about the rise in violences and crimes. But think about it, in these hard economic times, why make it harder for them to purchase by raising its taxes? Don't you think that they will do anything and by any means to get it? For example, stealing. And when people steal, it sometimes leads to murdering, creating a larger rise in violence and crime in the country. Mr. Speaker, the sale of alcoholic beverages is one of the main contributors to the successful sales of school functions. According to college.procom/alcohol/events, by all accounts, alcohol sales bring in additional revenue which schools can use to further promote the growth and development. End quote. Who are the supporters of these events?
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity. The honorable member of the opposition stated that alcohol sales, what did she say? Alcohol sales contributes to our schools. I would like to know, one school that owns our own factory or sell beers, how does revenue go from the alcohol dealers to the schools?
Excuse me, Mr.
Honorable member, you may answer the question through the speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about selling alcohol in the school. I'm talking about at the school function. I did not even complete my speech.
That's what I said.
Who are the supporters of these events? Parents and young people.
Mr. Speaker, should answer the question.
Honorable member, you may continue with your speech.
So who are the supporters of these events? Parents and young people. So prohibiting the sale of alcoholic beverages will only be a decrease in the amount of cash obtained as these school function, and as my colleague would have stated, ask the question, and let me reiterate, is the government willing to provide this school with all its monetary needs?
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I would like the opposition to explain what they're talking about.
Honorable member, you may pose your question.
I am standing on a point of clarity. I would like the opposition to explain. Doesn't the government...
Please state your point of clarity.
What revenue is generated from these activities? Is the revenue generated able to pay a teacher's salary or the whole school of teachers? Who pays their salaries? Who pays the bills of the school? How much beer could you sell in a night to support hundreds of children? In a couple hours? I would like to know. Who pays the teachers? How are the children taught? They aren't taught by alcohol and by the shopkeepers. They are taught by teachers who are paid by the government.
Honorable members, on the government side, it is your duty to do due diligence and listen to the member carefully, I may add. Listen carefully to the member's presentation.
Thank you.
I would ask the honorable member to go back into her presentation. and highlight the exact statement which says what deals with that issue you are asking.
Mr. Speaker, the sale of alcoholic beverages is one of the main contributors in the successful sales of school functions.
Honorable Member, does that answer your question, Honorable Member?
Mr. Speaker, I believe
the statement says
that as you're a teacher, you're complying with these statements.
Honorable Member, you may
on a
have
level
your
that is
seat.
highly politicized.
Honorable Member, you may have your seat.
Because the Honorable Member is talking redundancy.
Ask the Sergeant of Arms to escort you out of the Honorable House. Honorable Member, you would not threaten me in this Honorable House. The choice is yours. Any other outbursts, and I would ask the Honorable Member or the Sergeant of Arms to exclude you from this Honorable House. Please be mindful. Honorable Member, you may continue your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, just want to clarify and ask the Minister, or when there is school functions, are these monies used to pay teachers, or isn't it used to help the advance, like for example, purchasing photocopiers, helping to pay buses to travel to different sporting events?
For you? Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
I would like the Honorable Member for Clcou North to recant her statement where she asked why should the age of alcohol consumption be increased? Because I stated in my speech that although the age of consent is 16 and the age of voting is 18, based on a study done, it is shown that the human brain is not fully developed until the age of 25, and that consumption of alcohol under this age can permanently alter brain composition and function. I thank you.
Honorable Member, the Honorable Minister of Youth asks that you recant your statement because you are misrepresenting her statements.
Mr. Speaker, at the age of 18 years, if we are not, or if our brains are not fully developed, then it isn't fully developed for us to vote, put someone in charge of an entire state. So then why use a child? Why ask a child who doesn't know anything about a country, or why you should put someone in charge, vote and put someone there? Why is it that if someone's age isn't well developed, why allow them to drive? Obtain a driver's license.
Honorable Member, you may continue your presentation.
Before I end, Mr. Speaker, how are we so sure that raising the age to 21 will even prevent the consumption of alcohol under the age of 21? Or would it just create a larger rate of illegal underage drinking in the country? Instead, what needs to be done is to enforce the laws that are in place and start using the resources given, such as ID cards, to purchase these beverages. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Any more contributions? Honorable Minister for Tourism and Civil Aviation.
A pleasant good afternoon to you, Mr. Speaker.
A pleasant good afternoon to you, sir.
To my fellow parliamentarians, honorable members of the opposition. Today we assemble here to propose legislation into law which will decrease the availability of alcohol to all youths under the age of 21. Mr. Speaker, we have a drinking problem in Grenada. According to the World Health Organization, Grenada tops the region's alcohol consumption average at 10.5 liters of pure alcohol per person per year. Mr. Speaker, alcohol is glamorized by our society, accepted in our religious institutions, promoted by our culture, blatantly distributed by the suppliers. There's a rum shop on every corner. Rum is more available than food. We are proposing and enacting new legislation into law to protect our youths. We intend to do something about alcohol's negative role in our society.
Honorable Member for Clcou East. Honorable Member, why are you standing? Please state your point of order.
The honorable member is reading.
Really?
Honorable Member for Tourism and Civil Aviation, please be mindful of Rule 12, which states speeches shall not be read. However, members may refer to the notes. You may continue your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, we are proposing and enacting new legislation into law to protect our youths. We intend to do something about alcohol's negative role in our society. Once and for all, we're going to reduce its harmful use. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, there exists a general perception among some in Grenada that there are more urgent problems that need to be addressed than the harmful use of alcohol. Let's have a closer look at the side effects of alcohol use. Abuse. Mr. Speaker, we have an unprecedented rise in cases of non-communicable diseases which are caused by excessive drinking. A rise in criminal activity by young people under the influence of alcohol.
Honorable Member for Clcou North.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
The minister is still reading.
Honorable Member. Honorable Member, be mindful of Rule 12. Speeches shall not be read. However, members may refer to the notes. You may continue your presentation. Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, how do you consider one to be reading? Shouldn't I have the paper in my hand holding it? I am looking down. How can she tell that I'm reading? I don't have anything in my hand.
Honorable Member, I am just reminding you of Rule 12 of this Honorable House, which states speeches shall not be read. Members may, however, refer to their notes. You may continue your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, we have an unprecedented rise in cases of non-communicable diseases, communicable diseases, which are caused by excessive drinking, a rise in criminal activity by young people under the influence of alcohol, fatal road accidents, unwanted pregnancies, a rise in sexual assaults on our young people, and I have seen the gradual deterioration in health and physical appearance of relatively young men and women under the influence of rum. Mr. Speaker, only yesterday a local family had to bury their son who fell victim to the side effects of excessive drinking. Hard liquor or spirits is the most commonly abused form of alcohol in the Tri-Island state. Beer consumption is at 30%, 4% for wine drinkers, and a staggering 66% of our population drink hard liquor. Mr. Speaker, what is also more, I would have to say, what is also more alarming is the fact that the females are drinking more than the men in Grenada. As is proved by a WHO census, Mr. Speaker, Grenadian women are drinking too much.
Honorable Member for Clcou West.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
I'd like honorable member to state where he got the information where women drink more.
Honorable Member, it's your duty to listen to the debate. The Honorable Member quoted that his information came from the World Health Organization on a census done. He just said that before you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You may continue your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, Grenada has the 13th highest alcohol consumption rate in the world per capita, in the whole wide world. Mr. Speaker, our current Liquor License Act was passed in 1901. That is 117 years ago. Back then, liquor was inaccessible because you had to come here. You didn't have airports. You had to come here by boat ever so often. Mr. Speaker, I stand with my colleagues in full support of this new bill, which will reduce the access and availability of alcohol to all youths. This piece of legislation will amend our outdated Liquor License Act, making this law more efficient to deal with our current alcohol abuse epidemic that's plaguing our country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Is there any more contributions? Honorable Opposition Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I as Opposition Leader stand to defer with the proposed legislation, and my team is in full support. Mr. Speaker, this bill is largely ineffective because teens will still consume alcohol regardless if it's passed or not. Even if the WTO was to carry out another survey among secondary students, the survey may not produce.
Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Please.
The Honorable Opposition Leader is reading.
Honorable members, please be mindful of Rule 12, which states speeches shall not be read. However, members may refer to their notes. Honorable member, you may continue your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if the WTO was to conduct another survey, there won't be such of a great increase in the percentages that they have obtained in the 2008 research. Or the percentage might have increased due to pre-existing factors such as desire for excitement. Mr. Speaker, newly legal drinkers often purchase alcohol for the younger peers, causing a trickle-down effect. Mr. Speaker, another survey of the WTO showed a common source of alcohol among younger peers are that of those older peers giving them the beverage. Mr. Speaker, one may question, but won't alcohol damage the developing brains of youths, of young persons under the age of 21? No, and I repeat, no. Drinking in moderation does not damage young minds. If it did, Mr. Speaker, then do the Jews, the Italians, the French, and many others suffer brain damage? These groups perform well in mathematics and other subjects. Mr. Speaker, tax increases on the sale of alcoholic beverages in Grenada may not be the most attractive of policy options or cost-effective way of diminishing the demand for alcohol. Even if there was to be a change, it will be insignificant as factors such as advertising.
Honorable Member. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
I would like the Honorable Leader of the Opposition to retract his statement that legislation such as this would not decrease the consumption of alcohol by teens, when in my presentation I provided evidence that it does. Professor of Health and Law at the University of Virginia said that the evidence is overwhelming that raising the age reduces alcohol consumption, and also that the amount of deaths by persons who have been driving under the influence of alcohol has decreased by 57% for those who are under the age of 21. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker,
the Honorable Prime Minister wishes that you withdraw your statement or recant that statement. However, the Honorable Prime Minister forgot one part. He stated that the WHO, right? While the Honorable member states on the WTO. So I'm trying to figure out here what exactly is the WTO, because I know that the WHO that you stated is the World Health Organization.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, I never said the World Health Organization. I said a professor of health and law at the University of Virginia. And just for a matter of information, the WTO is the World Trade Organization.
I was referring, the reason why I asked that your study, earlier on you said that your study came from the World Health Organization, right? While he's saying his study comes from the WTO, that's what I'm saying. So basically it's two different organizations, two different sources of information, right? Does that answer the question?
He does not have evidence to prove something contrary, though.
Okay. Honorable member, you are asked to provide the relevant information to the Prime Minister and the Honorable House at your sources and your information. You are asked to provide credible information to the Honorable House. Do you have any information that you can share with the Honorable House at this time?
the information will be presented to him personally after.
Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Member informs that the information will be shared after the debate has concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You are welcome. Honorable Member, you may continue your presentation.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, as I continue, I said the increase in taxes may not, I didn't say did, would not, may not be most attractive way of decreasing the consumption of alcohol. And it will be ineffective, insignificant because of factors such as advertising, which has a major effect on the consumption of alcohol, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will this legislation be enacted upon by the government? I want the government to let us know how effectively will it be monitored. I thank you.
Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
The Honorable Member has concluded. Right. He has already concluded his speech.
So I cannot.
Right. But state your point of clarity and I'll ask him to answer.
All right. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, the Honorable Opposition Leader mentioned that alcohol in moderate amounts does not pose adverse health effects, but I would like him to please tell this House what does he use to measure what moderate is, what a moderate amount is?
Honorable Opposition Leader, the Honorable Minister of Youth seeks clarity on information that what is used to quantify the word moderate amount.
Mr. Speaker, I do not wish to clarify at this point.
Honorable Member, you will provide the Honorable Minister of Youth with the clarity she seeks, be it after the session is completed. Is there any more contributions on the motion?
Pleasant good morning. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to the bill before this honorable House here today. Mr. Speaker, while there is a national alcohol policy with key aspect measures to address the alcohol consumption, it is not comprehensive and it comprises of critical deficiencies. It is within this context that we recommend these important amendments through this bill before you this morning. Mr. Speaker, with such amendments in place, it will significantly address the social burden and existing problems related to alcohol consumption in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, this issue has had a long-standing effect on our communities, negatively impacting our kids, which in turn affects the household. Currently, the law permits persons from the age of 18 to purchase and consume alcohol beverages. However, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely necessary for us to raise this age from 18 to 21 for persons to legally purchase and consume alcohol and to prohibit its sale on school property during school functions. Mr. Speaker, we are seeking this amendment to address the following recurring social, health, and national issues. Violent behaviors by persons under the influence of alcohol, increase in persons being affected by stroke and hypertension from alcohol. A number of persons are residents of the mental hospital due to brain damage from alcohol. Teenage pregnancies, increase in incidence of sexual, domestic,
Mr. Speaker, I stand at a point of order.
Please state your point of order.
The Honorable Minister is reading.
Honorable members, please be mindful of Rule 12, which states speeches shall be read. Members may, however, refer to their notes.
My apologies. Vehicular manslaughter and accidents placed daily due to intoxication while driving. Mr. Speaker, according to Section 39 of the National Alcohol Policy, states, and I quote, currently prohibits the sale of alcohol to juveniles under the age of 16. The legal age of purchasing and consumption should be increased to 18 years of age. Persons should be prohibited from purchasing alcohol with the intent of supplying. Mr. Speaker, according to the World Health Organization, every country that had increased the legal alcohol consumption age to 21 saw a 16% decline in motor vehicle crashes and a drop in violent crimes. Mr. Speaker, we are on the right path. We must limit or reduce our children to exposure at an early age. Mr. Speaker, we must protect our children. They are the future of this country. Mr. Speaker, we call on producers, suppliers, and vendors of alcoholic beverages to be more aware of their moral, legal responsibilities and roles in preventing these harms to our children. Mr. Speaker, at the age of 21, a young person is thinking more clearly, more mature, and will be more responsible when making decisions on alcohol consumption. Mr. Speaker, in order to curb some of these harms, we, the government, will create campaigns to educate the general public. Mr. Speaker, the long-term... Please permit me 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
You may continue.
The long-term health impacts of alcohol abuse will hinder our economic development as a country. Mr. Speaker, we need a better future for our children. We believe this is the best way to achieve this. Start by protecting them and giving them the best chance to succeed. This is why I am supporting this bill to increase the legal age of consumption from 18 to 21 and to prohibit the sale of alcohol on school premises. I thank you.
Right. As many as in favor that the resolution be agreed upon, please say aye.
Aye.
As many, Honorable Member, as many, right. Those who oppose the resolution, please state by saying nay.
Nay.
Honourable Member?
Of Parliament.
Honourable Members, the Honourable Member has asked for a division of Parliament. The clerk is going to call each Honourable Member by name, and you are going to state your position on the resolution, whether aye or nay.
Honorable Roshaun Lendore, Prime Minister.
Aye.
Honorable Lena Bartholomew, Minister of Legal Affairs, Clcou and Petite Affairs and Local Government.
Aye. Honorable Khalene Emmons, Minister for Youth Development, Culture of the Arts, Leader of Government Business.
Aye. Honorable Kerryann Roberts, Minister for Health, Social Security and International Business.
Aye. Honorable Britney Miller, Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Development.
Aye. Honorable Oshnen Mathurine, Minister for Education, Human Resources and Religious Affairs.
Aye. Honorable Jisa Prime, Member for Clcou West.
Nay.
Honorable Adina McGilvery, Member for Clcou North.
Nay. Honorable Deandra Samuel, Member for Petite Martinique.
Nay.
Honorable Lisa Marie Simon, Member for Clcou East.
Nay.
Honorable Tishnel Mathurine, Member
Nay.
for Clcou Central.
Nay. Honorable Timothy Leggard, Minister for Tourism and Civil Aviation.
Yeah. Aye.
Honorable Member, can you clarify?
Mr. Speaker, I said aye.
Honorable David Lendore, Opposition Leader.
Nay.
Honorable Kerryann Avon, Minister for Infrastructure Development, Public Utilities, and Energy, Transport and Implementation.
Aye.
Honourable Members, after tallying the division of Parliament, the result shows 8 ayes and 6 nays. The resolution has passed. The resolution has passed.